Welcome everybody to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. I am your host, Shayna Terrell, educator activist dedicated to the lifelong struggle of freedom and liberation for my people. Welcome back to all my co-conspirators out there who watch and support the show, and welcome on in the room to our new supporters this week. I hope you all are finding our podcast, liking, subscribing, listening, telling a friend to tell a friend. Again, you can find us on all major networks, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and Google. So shout out to Brightbeam. Yes, Brightbeam and the Center for Black Educator Development for creating this platform for us to talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. We are back for a part 2, y'all, of matriarchs and building the Black Educator Pipeline. There is nothing like a mother's love. And today we get to connect with an amazing mama who was a freedom fighter back in the day in the movement, still a freedom fighter, okay? Still a liberator out here doing the good work. And again, a lot of times when you hear about social movements, you don't really hear about how the backs of these movements were built on the mamas who really put in the work on the ground and organized people, organized things for children, for families, and got people invested in the movement. So today we would like to welcome to the show Mama Camara Jordan. Hey, Mama.
Hey, Shade. Oh, wow. I'm going to go out of the room and come back in again just to hear that.
Listen, we are honored and happy to have you here today, Mama Camara, for sure. So, Mama, I want you to start off just by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself. If you could share with us, just kind of let the folks know who you are and a lot about your current work, past and present. Who is Mama Camara?
Okay. Oh, wow. Well, let's see. Born November 23rd, 1952 at Temple University Hospital on Broad Street.
Hey, Billy.
To two awesome, civic-minded, rebel parents in a way. My mother was really an advocate for education, and my father was really an advocate for civic activity in our hood. And I just stand on their shoulders, you know. So, born and raised in Philly. Summers in North Carolina. Let's here for Kannapolis, North Carolina, about 50 miles from Greensboro, where I learned later that my mom, you know, was a part of the lunch counter sit-ins, you know. Awesome. And so there were a lot of things they didn't talk about when we were little, but when we got older, we found out some things that they were doing back in the day. So, went to elementary school in North Philly, went to middle school at John Wanamaker Junior High School. It breaks my heart. It's torn down. It's now part of a building that Temple built something there. And then went to Kensington High School when it was all girls.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And went to community college. Wasn't toted as college material, so it took me longer to get through, but I got through. And it was in those years that I made some of the best friends that, for those who remain, continue to be my mentors, because they were on the front line of the movement. And so a lot of my orientation started right there at community college, you know, in the 70s, yeah.
That's awesome. That's dope. And you're known to many, Mama, as an educator for sure. And first I want to make a connection, just shout out to you for being born to two rebel parents. My parents are also from the South and participated in demonstrations in March with Dr. Martin Luther King. So shout out to our parents who, again, did all of this freedom fighting back in the day and stayed humble in the house.
Yes, humble in the house.
Had no clue. So I'm very similar to you, had no clue until was learned about civil rights in school and came home and talked about it. And my mom just real casual, like, oh yeah, you know, me and your dad went to jail twice. We marched with Dr. King. Mom, what? So
yes.
Very humble in the home for, again, we stand on their shoulders and the work they did.
Yes, absolutely, Shana.
Well, Mama, you are known to many as an educator. So can you share with us just your journey to education? What inspired you to become an educator?
I'm going to do my best not to let tears come to my eyes. But let me tell you, when I finished community college, and this is a shout out to those of you who are taking the long scenic route through school, okay? It's good. Keep it going. Keep it going. You know, never give up. When I left there, I went to Penn State Capitol campus. They were anxious to recruit black students, so it was a good time to be black because they needed some up there. But I went to Capitol campus right outside of Harrisburg. And in your third year of an educational pursuit, you have to go and be mentored. You know, you have to go sit at the feet of a teacher and, you know, and do what they need you to do in the classroom. Not student teaching, that's in your final year. But in that third year, you actually go and you engage. And so I learned about this independent school, Freedom Day School. They were in Harrisburg, which was 10 miles from campus. So I had my little jitney, and I would go there once a week. And I was mentored into this whole world of black independent institutions through Karimu and Kamau. They were husband and wife. They had a storefront school, and the whole school was like the size of just a regular row house. So I'll never forget, Kareem said to me one time, she said, we're going to be going to Brooklyn, New York for a CB regional meeting. And on that weekend, maybe you might not want to go home, but if you can, stay on campus and come ride with us up to Brooklyn. We're going by bus, you know. So to make a long story short, we did that. I stayed over their house the night before. We got on the bus, 4-hour ride from Harrisburg to Brooklyn. And I was, you know, young and naive, but just inspired by them, by their dedication. Well, we go to New York and we stay. They made arrangements. People came from all over on the East Coast. And that was my first exposure to something called the Council of Independent Black Institutions. So there were meetings all day on, the gathering, we got there on that Friday. That Friday evening, the sisters and brothers had prepared food for us. We went to a place called the East. And the East is well known, you know, and they prepared meal for us. And then we went to our respective sleeping quarters. And then we came back on Saturday for all-day sessions. And it was at that time that I got to see that this was a world in and to itself. Folks were there from all over. They were teachers, they were administrators, and from teacher techniques, culture, music, and I latched onto that. That became my niche after a while. You know, parent involvement, how to weave cultural motif and ethics and mores and all of that into your teaching. It was just, and I fell in love. I just fell in love. You know, it was nothing else to say. I was bit.
Listen.
You know, and that evening, as if that all day Saturday wasn't enough, they said, well, we're having a party to celebrate before y'all go back. So we ended up at this big house in Brooklyn, a Brooklyn brownstone owned by the Bandele family, and the whole house was the party, you know. So I got to hear Fela Ramsuti and Latin music and African music all fused together, and so it became just this kaleidoscope of just cultural activity, the smells, the food, the clothes. And I said, I could do this, you know. So when I finally graduated and came back to Philly, I needed to do some research. So is there anything like that here? You know? And I stayed in touch with the folks in Brooklyn. And my parents were like, okay, you're back now. You need to get to work. So I went and I started working in District 5 as a substitute teacher. And so one day when I was coming home, a car screeched and stopped. And a mama named Mama Wayma Hammond Brady, she slammed on her brakes. She said, what are you doing these days? And I said, oh, I'm working, I'm substitute teaching. She said, give me a call. This is pre-cell phone. So I scrambled in my bag. I said, tell me your number. So I write it down. She said, call me tonight. And I said, yes, ma'am. She took off. So I called her, and she invited me to a meeting, and that meeting subsequently became an interview. And that's when I learned about the Nidhamu Sasa School and their need for a preschool teacher.
Oh, wow. Look
And
at
that
that.
began my journey, my 8-year journey, which is now almost a 50-year journey. Because one of the things that's real important about what we're doing, Shayna, is we are building community. And so my working with these little tots, 2 and 3 and 4 years old, you know, who have become in their 40s and their 50s, are still a part of my extended family, because through that experience, we stayed connected, you know, and labeled things, you know, by those onlookers who thought we were rebels, cult, whatever, you know, they thought. Now many of them look in envy because it's like, y'all knew what you were doing.
That's what y'all were doing. That's what y'all were doing.
We were doing. So,
And to put this
yeah.
into some context for folks who listen to the podcast, they know I co-launched the organization with Sharif Al-Meki. And Sharif Al-Meki was a scholar at Nidhamu Sasa and speaks very highly of his experience at Nidhamu Sasa, and attributes it to like who he is today because of all the phenomenal things that he learned there and the experience that he had at Nidhamu Sasa. So Nidhamu Sasa is considered a black independent school. So, of course, you, Mama, was a part of that black schools independent movement. Can you talk to us about why, especially during that time, black independent schools were so important?
Yeah, so first of all, hats off to my mentors who are now in their 70s and 80s, those who still remain with us. Again, still hands on, because we connect, we stay connected. They, in the case of Nidhamu Sasa, it was founded by an organization called the Black Humanist Fellowship, and that has a history in and of itself. And programs came out of the Black Humanist Fellowship, of which NS Nidhamu Sasa was one. So they developed the school, and parents and community leaders, you've heard the name David P. Richardson, you know, Dr. Ed Robinson, folks like that, were very much a part of supporting and pushing the elders who formed the school. And during that time, and not to discourage us from not being able to do this again, but we did have the advantage of an era. We were in a time period where if you didn't know who you were, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, you were on the other side of the track, because it was the happening. There was so much fortification for the culture through the cultural arts movement, the civil rights movement, the black liberation movement, the Pan-African movement, you know, the African liberation. All this was happening. And so you saw this and you made your selection as where do you fit, you know. So the independent school movement was definitely supported and came out of this era and this time. The music, the art, the poetry, the clothing, the hair, you know, all of it was there to reinforce and support what we were about. So people who could buy into that, who believed in that, they found themselves either wanting to be involved in leadership, development, education, or being a parent. And being a parent is nothing to sneeze at, because all the independent schools that I know of were very keen on parent involvement, and sometimes the parents were the teachers were the parents. You know what I mean? They were on the boards, they were in leadership, they were very, very much a part of this guiding and steering and directing of what was going on, and they were valued and respected, and you know, and from all walks of life. We had parents that were laborers all the way to lawyers, you know, and judges, you know, because they had that common consciousness that this is how you make leaders, this is how you build leaders, you know, and it's built on that fortification that we are and we can and we will, you know. And when you hear a Sharif or you hear Dr. Eli Stanford or Nidhamu Chavis or any of them who are around and still hold dear to this history, they will tell you that the love and the support and the no nonsense, you are not going to fail because we got you, and you're expected because you can. They still talk about that.
They do.
They still talk
and it
about
rained
that.
through,
And
rained true.
yes, through and through.
in Nidhamu Sasa. And there's so many things that you're hitting on and saying that, I'm hearing. I'm just like, dang. Definitely the era piece is important. Meaning, like, I'm black and I'm proud, and we are African, or we being African people. Like, if you wasn't down with that cause, and people were like, who are you, brothers and sisters? Like, you're lost. It was really a decision on, like, are we going to be down with civil rights, where we going to be at peace and turn the other cheek, or are we going to fight back? But at the end of the day, we all black and we need these rights, right? Like,
Yes,
that
yes,
was
yes.
the spirit and the feel of that era. And I think it was so important because it brought so much unity to folks
Yes.
to want to
Yes.
nation build, right?
Yes,
and that was a
absolutely.
lot of the work that you guys did was nation build. But the other thing that's really key in your saying is, like, parents were respected. They were respected not only as parents but also as educators. So that's
Yes.
the time of the like when parents were invited into schools to contribute to what was
Yes.
happening and what was going on, or just
Yes.
pooling community resources together. You got this, or you do arts and crafts. Come on in there. We need a little arts and crafts teacher up in the school. You going to take on that on that pilot.
Yes.
Okay, you're connected
Yes.
to this group of folks. We're going to lean on you to organize this for the children in the community. So all that community resource pooling. And another thing that you pulled together that was happening back then is the barriers that did not exist for social economics amongst black folks. What you see now at large magnitudes, all these barriers where it is just poor black folks congregated and living in neighborhoods alone by themselves, not being able to pool resources because they don't have them. And then privileged, educated, bourgeois, whatever you may call it, black folks who are like pulling themselves out of these situations and living totally separate and non-existent and not in connection with the poor black struggle.
Yes.
Kind of like
yes.
we above it, or we become tourists, right? In these neighborhoods, just like white folks do. We're gonna be here to help, little volunteer support, and I'm out of here.
Then we out. Yeah. Yeah.
My kids can't go to school here, but your kids like, we're not gonna do that. Like, my kids need options, so a lot of those barriers existed.
Yes. Well, you know what's also key, and Mama Fasaha Trailer, who was the
Mama Fasaha,
headmistress of the school, she's she's alive and well. She and Baba and Jenzi were the ones who, I had to sit at their feet to go through that interview. One of the things I remember her talking about in a project we recently did for Scribe Video was that not everybody on the parent level was right on Black Power. There were those who saw the school as a private school and know, if nothing else, I want my child to get a good education from people who look like him or her. And some of them struggle to pay tuition and therefore work with the school to volunteer to do various things to work off, the tuition, which was reasonable and manageable. And if I'm not incorrect, on a sliding scale. But there were ways for you to get in and fit in. So there were parents who did not have the high level of consciousness that you may think of, like Sharif's parents. Yeah, Sharif's mama was no joke. Extremely on the front line. Yes, shout out to Mama Aisha. Oh,
may she rest in power.
Powerhouse, rest in power. Oh my, she was a force. For good, absolutely. But not everybody was on that level. But you'll hear the parents say that they were drawn to pull themselves up and learn because their children were coming home with all this new language and behavior and philosophy. And so in order for them to know what was going on, they needed to tap in. So there are parents who actually said that they learned through their children because of the independent school movement. So I think it's important to know that everybody, was not. There were those who were radical, rebel, right on, Black Power through and through. But then there were those who were toddling toward, and and bought into it little by little, got it, and then they're like, okay, we understand, because they could see what it was doing for their children.
Yes, and I think that's
You know.
important too, because I think that as I guess I would say, as social movements have been commercialized, so to speak, there is this expectation that folks have to have the same level of consciousness. When I think back then, folks were a lot more tolerable about folks not having the same level of consciousness, and they were okay
True.
with meeting people with where they are.
Yes, absolutely.
And coming together
Absolutely.
as a community.
Yes,
It was
that
a
is
lot of that.
so true. Thank you for saying that. And I really respect my elders, who modeled that, because when I think back, they didn't just sit at the feet or listen to or respect those who, were Afrocentrists, so to speak, and had all these letters behind their name because they had written books. They respected equally the parent that was worked in the factory, worked in the kitchen, the construction worker, with maybe nominal consciousness about Africanisms and all, and the struggle. They looked at them and valued them for who they were. And
Yep.
so I learned through that example, watching them, that no matter what level somebody's on, it's their integrity that you're looking for.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
And everybody
So
has something to contribute and need to be respected.
absolutely.
I crack
Absolutely.
up sometimes, when we're looking at modern day, and they like people should have this level of consciousness, or people are choosing not to prioritize, human rights or whatever. And I'm just like, what did y'all think was happening in the 70s? You thought everybody was here with a beret and a gun, or everybody was marching in line? No, this is not how the world works. And
Nope.
yeah, I think that bars or speakeasies or drugs just got created. All of that existed
Absolutely.
and back then as well.
It sure did.
You have to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And a while back, we had a couple activists and folks on the show, and they talk about like you have to have a group of people who are willing to take action and fight. You have to have another group of people who are willing to like help stabilize and organize, but sit in the background. And then you have another group that's just looking on, right? And like, all right, when y'all get things jumped off, I'm gonna be ready to support. Then you
Right.
do have a group of folks who are like, I'm gonna be along for the benefits, but I'm not jumping in none of this at all, and that's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Like all of that is okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
But Mama, you
Absolutely.
did, you did your time definitely at Nidhamu Sasa, but you have also had the experience of public schools, and even on being in the outside, being an advocate for schools, for people, for Black people. What do you think in the current state of schools, how they are today? What can we learn from Black independent schools, especially about how to ground children in their culture?
Yes, I take my hat off, much love and respect for those who are in our public schools and our charter schools and are holding up the banner for teaching and demonstrating and modeling self-love, respect. It's difficult. The battle with the outside culture is a challenge with current music. We've got social media, which is almost like a lifestyle in itself, So teachers have a lot to contend with. But those who are in the system, so to speak, I just love and respect those who, in spite of, they forge through and they model the kind of love, care, and respect for the children that they can, as much as they can, because that in and of itself has a lasting effect on children. It's one thing to be a Black teacher in the classroom, but how do you feel about those children? How do you feel about yourself, which is modeled in how you make faces, how you use tone, language, body language, when you are interfacing with those children. So we need them, because that's where the majority of our children are, in the public school system, in the charter school system. So to do all you can, the best you can, to weave those pieces in when you can. One of the things I appreciated, and I remember Sharif even saying that he got from one of our former Babas who's passed on with the ancestors, Baba Odu Changa. He
Baba
said,
Changa, yes.
yes, 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 yes. We had two Baba Changas. We had a parent Baba Changa Chikuyu who's still alive and well and teaching martial arts and preparedness. But we had Baba Odu Changa, who was, the Baba of the Martial Arts Institute at the school, which remains with his son now, Vida Sa'ana. So Baba Odu Changa always would make sure that when he was referencing something, he would reference somebody who did that. So in other words, if you're talking mathematics, he wanted to make sure you knew a mathematician. You're talking health and science, that you knew about Imhotep. And so that when the children embrace, well, I'm going to be at this, you can always come right behind, yeah, well, that's what so and so was. Let me tell you a little bit about that person, so that the children get to see that we've done everything, we've been in everything and been great at it, and there's somebody you can look to. You don't have to look at somebody that doesn't look like you to model that thing, that somebody did that. Whether it's an aerodynamics or whatever it is, somebody that looks like you has done that or is still doing it. So that the children get to see, oh, well, if they can do it, I can do it
So
too.
can I. And
That's key.
we have a lot of conversation here too about and so kids can understand whose you are, like who do you belong to, and you come from a very rich history and a very rich culture.
Yes.
A long line of educators, inventors, philosophers, mathematicians,
Yes.
surgeons, doctors, lawyers, athletes, builders, carpenters, all of that exists within your history,
Yes.
and your lineage. And you don't have to look to the other to feel like they're the ones who had all these great accomplishments. So that's super important and key for connecting. So I think we talk about cultural relevance again in schools. Folks are still trying to find ways to connect to the modern culture, which I think is important. But I think having children know their history, to be able to connect that to something that they want to do or want to connect to in the future, that is super key. And shout out to Baba Changa for that. Sharif always quotes Baba Changa. One of the things he always says is Baba Changa told him that if you're going to speak the truth, you have to be able to defend the truth.
Oh, yes.
And and that was the importance of definitely the martial arts components, right? That was their phys ed.
That was exactly it was,
So super important.
and that has philosophy built in it in and of itself. So when you talk to those who recall those that teaching through the Vidasana system, they actually are able to reference not just the katas that they did, but what was behind that, and the whole building of character that came through Baba Changa. So it was a whole lot more than just physical, Yeah.
Mental as well. I love that.
Yeah. Mental, spiritual, character development. Yeah, he covered it all. Absolutely. Yeah.
So with Black, independent schools rising, definitely and thriving at that time, I know that the notion of freedom schools had existed. And it's funny because I didn't attend a Black independent school, but I'm very familiar with the freedom schools movement. I was involved in freedom schools since I was a teenager. So extremely involved with the freedom schools movement, and then all through college, and then in my adult life. Right now we run Freedom Schools Literacy Academy, right? Our programming is centered around literacy and recruiting the next generation of educators. And freedom schools is a little bit different from Black independent schools, but very similar in a lot of ways. What are some of the major similarities that you see, or philosophies that you see in those two schools, so to speak?
So I am getting more involved because, like you said, Sharif's always got something for you to do. Well, he's and I've opened myself to that. I said, Sharif, call me if you need me. He said, okay, Mama. So be careful what you ask for. So that's a good thing. So I'm in the learning curve, learning mode to learn more about where particularly the youth. I know there's the youth literacy part, and there's the overall, cultural and educational fortification that goes on with the young people during the summer.
Yep.
Some of the physical training and development that's sorely needed, and cultural nuances that are added through dance and play and poetry and rhyme. So I'm becoming more aware of that whole, the curriculum, the
curriculum
structure, yes, of it. I do know that my limited involvement outside of being hey, you got it, let's go, let's do it, we can do this, has been to help the staff and the children learn the freedom songs of that era,
Yes.
and how the freedom songs were linked to many other popular rhythm and blues songs, of that day. So they'll hear a lick, they'll hear some bars that have been sampled in contemporary music, and so I'm like, okay, well, we got a song that goes to that. Really? Yeah, and it goes like this. So I find myself, and I look forward to being involved in the teacher training this year.
Yes.
Because I got some songs for you all to learn.
Listen, so I was hoping that we went there, because I want to ask you, what's your favorite song, Mama? I think that's super important. Do you have a favorite song?
Malcolm X was a friend of mine, to the tune of War.
Listen.
Cisco Kid was a friend of mine. Well, we had a mama named Mama Samira Woods who changed the word to that song to Malcolm X was a friend of mine.
Can you give us a little snippet?
Malcolm X was a friend of mine. Do, 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 do. Malcolm X was a friend of mine. Do, 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 do. Well, he taught blackness and nation time. Do, 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 do.
Yes,
and it goes on with the same exact tune. It fits right in. She fit it perfectly, so you don't miss none of those bars. So they would go on the radio and they would hear Cisco Kid was a friend of mine, and the tune said, no, that's not the song. It goes like this, and they would
sing Malcolm X.
It's the way we.
Yes, shout out and happy belated birthday to Brother Malcolm, born May 19th. Shout out to Brother Malcolm. So this song was right on time, Mama. I love that. I love that.
Right on time.
And we all know, like, the movement has a soundtrack. So for you guys to be able to teach young people those freedom songs, and that is a very similar component that happens in the Freedom School as well, because the movement has a soundtrack. We give our love, we give our frustration, we give all our feelings out musically and in music. But exactly what you said, teaching our young people the rhythms and the sounds and remixing other people's stuff, just the thing to do. Like, even in modern day, right? Like, our thing now is rap. So we'll remix a song and put new beats and put new rhymes, but freedom words.
Do it.
Right
do it.
to that song.
Do it.
That tradition, that history most certainly continues on. We are definitely looking forward to you adding to our book of songs.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, I'm going to say this and let you move on to the next theme, but I was going through some notes today, and I found something that I had totally forgotten about. There was a song by the Spinners. Sadie, don't you know we love you, sweet Sadie?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yeah. Well, look, Martin is replaced in there.
Martin.
Yes.
Don't you know we love you, sweet Martin?
Yes, and then it's got other lyrics that make total sense, and they're teaching, So what he did, what he fought for, what he walked for, what he marched for, so it's in the song. So you get a lesson as you're singing the song.
Yes.
So they weren't just thrown together willy nilly. They were crafted,
Very crafted.
And,
but then you just have some creative young people. My favorite one, definitely from Freedom Schools in Philly, we did a remix for Fannie Lou Hamer.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Fannie Lou Hamer was a brave old soul, and a brave old soul was she. She was a teacher and a preacher, and she knew how to reach it, so let's hear it for Fannie. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Then we go ahead on. So it was real good.
Yes.
Amazing dope. So for all our folks out there, listen, if you're looking for great stuff to teach your kids and sing with your kids to uplift and empower, definitely find some affirmation, find some songs to kind of sing into and pour into our young people every morning. It ain't always got to be about the commercialism or the nonsense that's on the radio. Make up a rhyme, make up a remix, okay? To honor our freedom fighters. What dope, amazing.
You all are also doing an excellent job. That's something that was carried on from the 70s, 80s, 90s up until now with the Freedom Schools, is learning to listen to and respect the youth. We respected the children. We gave them platforms on which they could. We did not laugh at their little suggestions and ideas and thoughts. We listened to them, and they knew we were listening. And we gave them eye contact. We would be quiet, and we listened when they spoke. It wasn't always about the adults speaking, you know.
And that's also
then weave
very
some
similar.
of their ideas into the methodology and approach that you're using. That's very important for building self-esteem of young people.
Yes, that's also very similar with Black Liberation, Black Power, Black Independent, and Freedom Schools, is that those movements are generally led by the young people. The young people's voice, their strength, their tenacity, a lot of times is what carries the movement through. You know, they come out in droves because they're so fearless.
Yes.
Young people are so fearless and don't have anything to lose. I model a lot of my workings and how I operate by Sister Ella Baker. Because she believed in young people, and she believed that, you know, that as long as movements and things were led by the young, they're going to carry us through the storm.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I model a lot of my thinking and work after Sister Ella Baker and believing in young people.
Powerful.
That's the best way to get movements done. You have to believe in the young people. And another big thing is, like, they are the future. They are the next up. So if we don't invest in them, we don't pour in them, we don't teach them how to advocate, we don't respect them, what do they become?
Yes.
So Black Independent Schools, Freedom Schools, Black Liberation Movement, that was one of the keys to getting ahead and getting our voices out there, was believing in our young people. So definitely press upon that.
Yes, absolutely. And continue to be encouraged, because while they may not be in the number that they were back in the 70s, there are still independent schools out there. They're still out there. The Council of Independent Institutions still exists. I need to learn a little bit more about what they're doing now, but they're still alive and going, and there are still some independent schools. I'm glad that for those who did go charter for various reasons, that they took a lot of the the approaches and the science and brought that in with them. So when you see your charter schools doing Kwanzaa and dressing in certain kinds of attire and naming their classrooms and decorating the core of the school, that's coming from the movement, and they're keeping that alive. So get it in however you can get it in. I salute the Freedom Schools. I'm just so proud of you all for keeping that going.
Thank you.
Because that summer impact means a lot. It means a lot to those children.
It means a lot for kids. It means a lot for the college students who are coming back and work, and the high school students as well, who are getting that experience. But I'm glad you bring that up, Mama, that Black independent schools are still around but may not be in the number. Why don't you think we have more Black independent schools or Black-owned schools out here?
That's a very good question. I think that people have gone into other industries in terms of their career choices. I long for the day of the return for our cohesion as communities, where people who teach can feel supported by parents and the community, so that they won't feel like they're all alone or under attack. That will motivate people to go into this as an endeavor. It takes courage. It takes commitment. Anyone who looks to do this full time or part time, there is a need for it. I know you would get the support, because there are people who would love for their children to be in this kind of setting, in the kind of setting that an independent school. So I encourage this movement, the work that you're doing, the work that Sharif is doing with this recruitment movement, to not only build careers and have young adults, particularly males, look at teaching as a career, but looking at it as an opportunity to look at the business model and say, hey, we can do this as a school. We can create, an institution and it can be small for start. I remember John Churchville from the Freedom Book Day School. I remember the Ivy Leaf School. That was a husband and wife that ran that school. They're the models, the research can be done to look at that and create anew. So there has been a disconnect. We've had a major assault on our culture. And we've lost some soldiers. We still have a lot of them that are still around, but we are definitely in a position where I think we have to constantly point to the positive and what is good and righteous and healthy for us, because there's elements out there, not to be discouraged, but the truth of the matter is, there are folks who, are trying to, break us down and take us away from our core.
Yes.
And you hear it in the music, and you hear it and you see it in, what is seen as popular is, celebrities that often are not upholding the kind of morals and ways of thinking that, are a good influence on our children. And so, some of them are turning around because they're starting to have children themselves.
So their own,
but some of them still don't get it. And this culture, this dominant culture is something we have to constantly
fight against and
absolutely
up against.
Absolutely,
Most certainly.
Absolutely.
But again, you bring up some other phenomenal points in the difference of then and now, and I just wonder, you guys did such a great job of organizing parents to demand better education for their children. And I feel like some of that is lacking now, and it's almost like parents don't know where to go or what to do. Can you give us some suggestions, especially about at Nidhamu Sasa, how you guys organized parents and got parents involved in the movement for independent Black education?
So, this is something that I know that some general mainstream schools do too. Is children are still the delights of their parents. No matter how challenged that family may be, they still see and know their children to be the light of their lives. And so we would have the children do things that the parents had to be involved in. So we would have like Freedom Day, where we were upholding the different liberation movements from on the continent, and they had to wear certain colors and come marching in, an auditorium, whether it was evening. You look at the times. Now, again, the challenge is people working 2 and 3 and 4 jobs, but you find creative ways to include the children in activities, and then here come the parents, because the parents want to see their child on the stage or saying that line or singing that song or reciting that poem. And so they get inspired when they see, oh, that's what you're doing. Oh, that's what they're learning. Okay, I heard him in the bathroom. He kept reciting this thing over, and that's what he was reciting. So putting the children in a position where they almost become the teachers by giving them activities and projects and programming to be involved in, and then the parents, they follow suit. They in turn are there not only support, but they're getting an education too, and the pride that stirs up in them. So that's just one of the techniques. Having joint projects with a child and the parent need to do something together. To produce,
I love that.
To produce, whether it's a science project, a math project, or what have you. It's challenging today because people, are maybe more disjointed sometime in their families, and that single parent might be working 2 and 3, 4 jobs. But encouraging parents to link up, that was another thing that we did. We encouraged parents to network. I remember, even though I taught there, I would be picking up children, taking them to school and dropping them off, because I drove and some of the parents didn't. So we created a village, among ourselves, so that we supported each other. It's like, look, we're a partner in this to get Khalil to school, or Shima to school. So therefore, I'll pick up your groceries, you pick up my laundry, and we're gonna work it out. We're gonna get him to school, her to school, and so that partnership, encouraging that, based on proximity, not asking people to drive all the way across town, but having leadership help to make these connections, like, so and so lives near so and so, and maybe you two can talk, and maybe you all can, network and get this done,
and get together,
and get on this on behalf of the children. So now the children, then they see this village, my mom, my dad, my mom and dad, my grandmom, is on the phone with so and so's mom, and they're working out how we're going to get to the game on Saturday.
Yes.
I'm just throwing things out there that I know really took place.
But you're throwing things out there that I think they may seem simple, but when you look at it in hindsight, they work. I think, being in K-12 for quite some time, with the brilliance in what you said, especially about creating activities that the parents have to participate, right? Like your kids, your pride and joy, so you're going to show up. And what you see is when you move from kindergarten all the way up to high school, those activities, it starts to decline.
Yes.
It's cute to have a monthly assembly when they're in elementary school and honor everybody. They get together and sing songs. But when you get into the high school culture, where does that go? And people have to be innovative and creative in thinking about what activities can you do that still requires parent involvement, where parents will still show up and show out for their children to keep them engaged and involved. And how can some of these activities become parent-led? Instead of allowing to sit back and allow the school to just create all the ideas or activities or events for families and communities.
Right. Yes. And then and looking at the cycle of human growth and development as you get more adolescent into teen, some of that morphs into art and culture, like you were talking about the rap, that was created by one of the students. It turns into athletics. It turns into visual arts. So those are the things that are still very much a part of our DNA, and when fostered and given some encouragement, there's room for activity in and around those things. And a lot of times polling the young people themselves, well, what is it that you would like to do? I want to create a so-and-so. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's see how we can help you do that. So watching those stages of human growth and development, and then tapping into, okay, so what's attractive to them at this age? Maybe it's playwriting, maybe it's poetry, and we got the technology now. They're making videos and whatnot. So maybe it's that.
Yes.
Using these various modes to
create activities
and venues and ways, avenues for them to communicate and connect and create product or thought, what have you.
And tap in. Yes, definitely. Yeah. One other thing I want to talk about and highlight is we kind of grazed over it, but I want to lift this up a little bit, right? So when folks are talking about Sharif El-Mekki or Dr. Ayla Stanfords of the world, right? They were students right there at Nidhamu Sasa. Like that, that is who they were. They were young people right there at Nidhamu Sasa. And then folks would think, like, what was poured into those young people to create these great leaders? And here's a difference, right, that I will point out between a Sharif El-Mekki and Ayla Stanford than any other black celebrity, right? The work that they're doing is solely and strictly for their community, right? This is not a financial gain, capital gain. It ain't for the fame, none of it. Their impact is felt the way a celebrity's impact would be felt. But what they are actually doing and what's in their heart and what they're setting out to do is community work. It's nation building work. And that foundation came from somewhere, right? It came from Nidhamu Sasa. So I would love for you to talk about some of the early seeds that were planted and folks like them. They're not the only ones. They are two of the most well-known folks who came out of
Right.
Nidhamu Sasa. But what seeds were planted in those cohorts and those young people who's coming up through that independent school that turned them into like continuous nation builders and co-conspirators out here?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that come to mind. When I think of them, yes, they're the most popular who, have done a lot of dynamic work in Philadelphia. But we looked at, so there's a couple points. Let me see how I can tie this in. As long as those children knew that who they were and what they could be was enough, if they put the best of themselves in it, it was okay. Sometimes you'll hear this, well, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a... I'm as equally proud of those who became chefs, of those who became administrators in some other areas of work, as I am those two who are the most noted because of their character and what they're doing, even if it's on the family level. Great parents, great block captains, what they are doing something impactful, and they are carrying themselves in such a way that exemplifies what they were taught and how they were taught. I would say we love them unconditionally, and we challenge them. Discipline. Nidhamu Sasa means discipline now in Kiswahili. The DH is pronounced like a T. And so the drive for, you're loved, you're going to be supported, you can do it, and we that's what we expect. That's what we expect, period. And that's what Kamau, Eli's brother, always says. He says, you are going to do this, and you can do it, period.
Yes.
What else is there to say?
Yep.
I think about Shani Harvey, who is co-partners in partnership with a fitness studio, one of the most successful ones in the Northwest. So she's a fitness trainer. So whatever it is, who are you? What are you carrying? What quality of work are you putting out there? And how it's modeled in your in your family and what you're doing. So and you'll run into another former Nidhamu Sasa person, and maybe they're just parenting, but they're parenting the best way they can. So it didn't matter to us whether somebody came out with PhD behind their letters behind their name. It was, who are you and what are you doing, and are you doing the best you can to role model for yourself first, your family, and your community. So
Yes.
Yeah, so we challenged them and we loved them, and they still talk about that love. That's why, to me, it's not enough to be a black teacher. It really isn't. It's do you really care? Are you showing your best face, and do they see it in your eyes and in your behavior and your tone of voice? How you speak to them. When they walk away, do they feel that you care about them, or that you're just there to get paid?
I love that. I really do, because a lot
crucial.
of folks, it's very crucial, and a lot of folks don't make that connection. Meaning, like, just because somebody, the saying goes, just because they are skin folk, don't mean they're all kinfolk.
Kinfolk.
And you can't just throw a black person in front of a child just because they're black.
No.
Got to be quality people, and you have to care about children. You have to care about them as humans, and I think that's really important for folks to take about the stuff that happened in Nidhamu Sasa. You guys were raising good people, great citizens who were conscious and who understood their mission. And of course, like, education happened. Like, it's not like it didn't, right? You wouldn't have who you have today. But you guys raised good people. And the goal wasn't we want to have all these famous and phenomenal people come out of here. No, we wanted to raise young people who were going out into the world to do great things and to build up their community.
Yeah. And you know what else too? I just thought about this. My advisors, Mama Fasaha, Mama Mwamini and Mama Samira, they believed wholeheartedly that, and the males too, Baba Changa, Baba Jehudi, Baba Mjenzi as advisors, they believed that we could challenge the status quo or believe that children could not reach certain benchmarks at certain ages. So the children were learning how to read, and this was something that was criticized, but we forged ahead and we did it in a way that was gentle, in a way that was supportive of their curiosity, okay? So that natural curiosity of a child that makes them pick up a book and start to use the visuals of that book, and you start talking to them about what they're seeing. That's all the rudiments of learning to read. Well, that happens at a very early age. So they're modeling you, so you're reading. They pick up a book. They might turn it upside down. But they see you picking up that book. And so now they're looking at, and you engaging in conversation with them about what's going on there, the pictographics that are going on in that book, and reading to them, okay? So we were doing some cutting edge things that folks typically would say, well, you don't need to start teaching a child to read at that age. Yeah, as soon as they're interested.
That's when
and what's age appropriate, which might be just reading to them and talking about the pictures and pointing out the colors, and so forth. Those are the foundational pieces that go into learning how to read, right? And so they learn that the body parts, when we show them the words, they learned at 3 years old, they could say their mother's name, their father's name, and their address and their phone number.
Yes, some of that, again, basic foundational stuff and pushing kids beyond what others felt like they could achieve.
Yeah.
Raising the bar for black children is what you are pointing out and saying. Raising the bar for black children and knowing and believing that they could meet that bar.
Yes.
Which is super important. But it's lacking right now.
And we would have fun doing it because we would have morning drills. And so,
joy.
What's
Black
Mima?
Joy.
That's right. Oh, my goodness. We would have morning drills and you have your rhythms going to it. And so that's your Mima. But what's your Mima's name? So it wasn't like, oh, my name is Pookie. But what's your name? Mommy called you Pookie. But what is your name? What is your first, middle, and last name? So now they're 3 and 4 years old and they could stand up and they could recite all that.
But doing it with joy is also important.
With joy, yes.
Because people forget that how important that is. And again, as your description, and then now you see why, or we all see why, Sharif has this love for this place that he went to, right? He got to learn. High expectations were set for him. Someone believed in him, but they did it all with joy and laughter. Yes. It was a fun place to be for students. It was an exciting place to be for students, but the bar was set for them, and they had folks that believed in them. So anybody out there listening who is thinking about starting a black independent school, Go for it. Do it with love, do it with joy, do it with high expectations. Do it. Mama, I would love for you, before we wrap up, to share a little message to our current generation of freedom fighters and liberators out there in our education community. What would you tell these folks? How to keep them encouraged?
Don't stop. Don't stop. It's worth it. You're standing on the shoulders of ancestors who have gone before you, who laid the trail. The reward. I can't tell you. I am 69 years old, and I am proud of being Mama. Some people are like, don't call me Mama, because you become, and I can't quote the African proverb, but your name, they say, who are you if your name is not heard in the marketplace? So not that you should do it for ego or fame, but it fortifies you. It keeps you healthy and strong as well, to know that you are feeding, but you're also receiving. That reciprocity, there's nothing like it. You get to see yourself in the faces and the models of those young people that you help to grow and develop. So it's worth it. It's worth
Definitely
it.
worth it.
It's worth it.
And
It's
also,
worth it.
Mom, we always ask our guests to thank a Black teacher before you leave here. So if you have 1, 2, however many Black teachers past or present that you would like to thank, we want to give you the floor to do that right now.
Oh my goodness. Mr. Bennett and Mr. Strayhorn and Miss Buck. They didn't take anything off of us in junior high school. And you know what? I just loved that era of teacher because they knew how to motivate and inspire us and hold us to a standard and make us earn the treats that they gave us when the groups from the Uptown Theater would come and practice on us on Friday before they performed at the Uptown. So they knew that, okay, these young people like music. Well, let's give them something to earn. They're going to earn a free concert, a trial concert before it goes to the Uptown, you know. So these teachers, they were innovative, they were creative, and they paid attention to young people enough to know what would turn us on and what would get us excited about learning, you know, and encouraging us and holding us to a standard and disciplining us when we fell off the wagon a little bit. So I remember those teachers. There are others, but those 3 come to mind.
Listen, shout out to them and that experience
Yeah.
again in shaping and molding you. Mama Camara, we want to thank you for joining us today at Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. And thank you so much for being a mother in the movement.
Yes.
Again, we stand on your shoulders. We are continuing your legacy and continuing your work. And we will have you, okay?
And
This summer
I look
at Freedom
forward
Schools.
to it. I look
We're looking forward to
it.
more of these songs.
Yes,
I want to thank
indeed.
everybody out there for joining us for Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. Remember to tell a friend, like, subscribe, download, and listen. And we'll see you back here again next week for another episode. Peace, y'all.